Hello everyone and welcome back to the Solutions Lab. With you once again, I am Allison, Microsoft Technical Advisor, and today I'm here to discuss with you everything you need to know about Microsoft's latest network operating system, Windows Server 2019. However, before we get into the specifics surrounding that new release, let's briefly talk about what that might mean to you. You see, this year, 2019, is going to be a very big year for digital transformation. In just the next 12 months, customers who are running Windows Server 2008 R2, Exchange Server 2010, and Windows Server are going to face some important decisions concerning their IT. On January 14th of 2020, these three major operating systems reached their end of support provided by Microsoft. This means no more security updates and therefore a substantial increase in vulnerability. Now, this pattern isn't anything new, especially for those of you who are watching this webcast. I'm sure that most of you remember when Windows XP was entering its end of support phase something about 5 years ago. This should be very similar. However, for those of you who do remember that, you probably remember fighting to get your customers to upgrade in time because of all the major security issues and wide-ranged attacks that were made on XP machines following that end of support. Oh, how quick we are to forget, but the WannaCry ransomware attacks actually began in direct response to the Windows XP end of support. And even though Microsoft had released a patch to close that exploited backdoor, like shortly before that end of support happened, many organizations still did not apply that patch, and therefore WannaCry was able to spread. Now, certainly I'm not here to predict the next WannaCry attack, which really so successfully exploited hundreds of thousands of machines. However, I really feel that we can learn from this experience and recall just how easy it was for hackers to develop software that was exploiting well-known security faults. Now, here's the fun part. There is, in fact, a reason to believe that this year's refresh will be significantly larger than that of the Windows XP refresh. According to a study that was done just in last December of 2018, over 37% of Windows users are still using Windows 7. When Windows XP was about a year out from its end of service, that number was around 25% of the Windows user base was still on XP. So for any of you that were around during that time, this data should certainly alert you to the massive opportunity for refresh this year. But I would even argue that it's even bigger than that. For most organizations, if the majority of their endpoint devices are running Windows 7, it's likely that they were probably deployed something like 7 to 10 years ago. Well, then it stands to believe that their backend was likely deployed around the same time. This means that these organizations have instances of Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2, possibly even Exchange Server 2010. And since many organizations, they likely refresh their entire infrastructure around the same time, their networking applications are probably just as old. And this legacy infrastructure keeps them from taking advantage of many modern and cloud-ready technologies that would keep them competitive. In addition, these legacy systems often have outdated security and time-consuming processes due to, well, simply their software and hardware limitations. All of these things lead to a less productive and more expensive IT solution. The end user may not even know that they're spending more than they should. And all of this leads to very big opportunities out there for you to profit from as long as you begin that ball rolling now. Start those conversations today. Now, several of the modern workplace features I'm referring to can only be accessed by leveraging certain cloud services. However, many customers are perhaps still not ready to migrate their entire environment to the cloud. Now, this is due to a number of reasons, including a reluctance to move important business resources permanently outside of their organization. Now, while most of these concerns are actually, in fact, unfounded and can be lifted using a number of cloud technologies, today, this is still our reality. So, for those customers and for others, Microsoft introduced Windows Server 2019. Today, I want to discuss with you the differences between 2019 and 2016, that's some that I feel that you should know, some of the best practices and things to consider once you've decided on upgrading, and then we're going to check out a new product that is out right now that can help you manage that entire environment. But first things first, we have a couple of clerical changes that we want to make you aware of. With this release, Microsoft has changed up their naming convention just a little bit. What I mean is, you're never actually going to see a Windows Server 2016 R2. Instead, we have Windows Server 2019, and that's going to be the convention that they're going to stick with. Microsoft has simply done away with the cadence of releasing a base network OS and then just a few years later releasing a major update in the form of a revision 2. However, that sort of release schedule and concept is going to remain the same. Server 2019 delivers major improvements on Server 2016 while still built on that familiar base OS experience. Now, a few years ago, Microsoft adjusted their OS release schedule, so now there are actually two channels with which they release new products. The first is the Long-Term Service Channel, or LTSC, and the second is the Semi-Annual Channel, or SAC. Now, both their network and desktop OSs get released on this schedule, and the difference is pretty simple. LTSC is the release model that you're already familiar with, where there's a new major release every 2 to 3 years. You purchase the license, install it on a computer, and you're done. Minus any major security updates and those sorts of things, that's all you need to do. Whereas SAC could almost be considered more of a software as a service model, with a regular cadence of new releases twice a year, usually in the spring and the fall. Another way to look at it is the LTSC is the culmination of years of the SAC's gradual enhancements. That way, when each LTSC release comes out, it should feel more evolutionary as opposed to something entirely new and unfamiliar. Now, it's generally considered by best practice by Microsoft to have your servers running on LTSC and your desktops to run on SAC. This way, your backend remains stable, only receiving updates that are scheduled and managed by your IT or yourself, and your Windows desktop machines stay on SAC so that they receive regular and automatic security updates, optimizations, and it causes very little interruption to their daily work. This makes it better for these ever-changing systems that are constantly being interacted with to make them more stable and better performing. Now, if you're considering SAC for your server builds, keep in mind it is only available in the core model. In other words, it does not include the desktop experience. This release that we're talking about, Windows Server 2019, is the latest from their long-term service channel. And once again, this version of Windows Server, the versions available are Data Center, Standard, and Essentials. And the way these three versions is licensed has not changed either. In other words, you license them per core, not per CPU. No surprises there, but if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer them. Now, the difference between these editions really hasn't changed too dramatically either, so I'd like to just review it real quick so you understand the licensing. So Data Center has the advantage of having unlimited virtual machines, and it offers a number of the software-defined technologies that we're going to discuss in just a minute. Standard includes practically all of those same features of Data Center without the software-defined networking, and it is limited to a total of 2 VMs. But besides that, their feature sets are pretty much identical. We'll include a link below with a comparison chart so you can actually see the fine details there. Finally, we have Essentials, which has pretty much stayed exactly the same as in 2016, but some things to keep in mind. You're still limited to 25 users and 50 devices. If you configure the Essentials machine as your domain controller, it has to be the only domain controller in the network, and that controller cannot be connected with a trust to any other directory. It has to stay alone. But probably the biggest change with Essentials 2019 is that it no longer includes the Essentials Experience role, which you might remember helped to simplify things like file sharing and device management. Those roles are now made simple and available as part of their new Windows Admin Center, which we will go into, and I'll show you a demo in just a bit. Now, with that in mind, let's focus on what is new with Windows Server 2019. There was a huge emphasis on bridging the gap between your on-prem environment and resources available to you in the cloud. We can break down these improvements into 4 categories. The first is security. Now, security often receives a lot of improvements. This is no exception. So let's highlight a few that I think would be of interest to you. First up would be Windows Defender. It has received a huge upgrade to endpoint protection and monitoring with a new product called Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection. Originally, it made its debut with the Windows 10 Fall Creators Update, but Windows Defender ATP is a unified platform for protection, detection, and response. But that's just the headline. What does that mean to you? Well, first of all, it is an agentless and cloud powered. In other words, there's no additional deployment or infrastructure necessary. Nor do you ever need to worry about errors or delays due to incompatible updates, as it's actually always up to date in the cloud. That said, it's built into Windows and Windows Server, so it has a deeper insight into what could be causing the problems. And it does this by leveraging Microsoft's Intelligent Security Graph, which, for those of you who don't know, is Microsoft's database with a massive amount of threat intelligence and security data on their operating systems. Then finally, it does all of this automatically. The automated security features that are included, they help you take your security to the next level without having to do much, and it allows you to go from alert to remediation in just a matter of minutes. Windows Defender ATP is available on all versions of Windows Server 2019, as well as the latest builds of Windows 10. You can actually download it today on supported operating systems and deploy it in minutes. I believe it is supported by 2012 R2 and above. Now, next is software-defined everything. Now, software-defined technologies were really introduced with Windows Server 2016. And since then, they have really caught on in the industry. So, of course, with this release, Microsoft has added additional features to its software-defined functionality. So first, software-defined networking. It already adds an additional layer of security, simply by providing the controller a centralized view of the entire network. But with 2019, it takes that a step further by encrypting all of the traffic that's traveling even between virtual machines. Additionally, they've added virtual network peering, which allows you to connect two virtual networks together with very little effort, and once they appear as one. Then, once you are outside of the virtual environment, 2019 uses a virtual subnet to encrypt all traffic as well. This way, intruders, even if they're physically on the network, they would be unable to eavesdrop or tamper with or forge access to data. They've also added features like firewall auditing to keep a log of all firewall access, as well as an egress meter, which basically is a way to monitor network usage within the virtual and software-defined networks. Now, if you're familiar at all with hyperconverged infrastructure, or HCI, all of this talk about software-defined IT infrastructure might ring a bell. See, a hyper-converged IT environment is one that basically virtualizes all aspects of that network with things like virtualized computing, software-defined networking, and software-defined storage. Now, traditionally, HCI has only really been practical for more enterprise environments. However, lately, I've actually seen it adopted a lot more in mid-tier organizations. And that is because not only does HCI provide a significant bump to the system's resiliency and uptime because it utilizes multiple points of failure, but it also significantly increases efficiency and performance. And at this time, it is highly recommended to those high availability installations that you might have in the back burner to consider HCI for your next deployment. Therefore, I am pleased to say that designing such an environment has never been easier and more powerful than with Server 2019. In fact, 2019 adds something called new nested resiliency for two-node hyperconverged systems as well. This actually allows for up to 2 hardware failures at the same time. This was inspired by RAID 5+1 technology, if you're familiar with that. Now, software-defined networking and new features in Hyper-V and a lot of things like that have definitely helped that effort. But probably, to me, more exciting has been a really big emphasis placed on storage management. I'm talking about the new features when using Windows Server 2019 and the REFS file format. REFS, or Resilient File System, was introduced again with 2016 and further developed in 2019, and is definitely one of the strengths of a modern storage solution. You see, REFS absolutely destroys NTFS in performance and scalability, as it's able to manage very large amounts of data very quickly. REFS now allows of up to volumes of 1 yottabyte, or that is 1,000 billion terabytes. To put that in perspective, 1,000 terabytes equals 1 petabyte. 1 petabyte, or excuse me, 1,000 petabytes equals 1 exabyte. 1,000 exabytes equals 1 zettabyte. And 1,000 zettabytes equals 1 yottabyte. Additionally, REFS uses what's called the B+ tree mode to manage its file structure. And this can help to actually reduce the number of I/O operations on a drive. Basically, this increases the performance on a drive even if the IOPS and the actual physical limitations of the drive never increase. It's amazing. One of my favorite aspects of REFS is that you actually no longer need to ever run check disk on the drive ever again, as REFS actually can check and correct any file corruption on the fly, often without even taking the drive offline. But those are some things that were available in 2016. With 2019, REFS now has deduplication and compression features built in. And with dedupe and compression combined, you can store up to 10 times more data on the same volume. And it supports volumes of up to 64 terabytes and files of up to a terabyte each. The best part is that it's incredibly simple to turn on and configure all of this. And due to its multi-threaded architecture used in this process, it actually keeps the performance impact of these features on those drives at a bare minimum. Now, one important downside of REFS to note, however, is that it cannot be used as the operating system drive. In other words, it is used exclusively for file and data storage. However, the true capability of REFS is unlocked when you integrate that file system with Windows storage spaces. Now, storage spaces, again, was something that was introduced in 2016, and if you're not already familiar with it, you should be. Storage spaces is a technology in Windows based conceptually on RAID, but is implemented using software. In this way, it groups together all the drives that are available into one large storage pool, and then you use the capacity from that pool to create individual volumes. These volumes, or spaces, are highly available as it stores extra copies of your data automatically. That way, if one drive fails, you still have a copy of your data somewhere in that pool. This concept is then taken to the next level once you introduce multiple servers gathered together in a cluster. So, let's just say we have an environment with 3 servers, and we want to create a high available solution. Well, let's take a look. First thing we have to do is cluster these 3 servers together. This can be done very easily with a PowerShell commandlet like new cluster. Once this is done, storage spaces can get to work by combining all of the physical drives on this server into one storage pool. This storage pool offers enterprise-level features such as caching, tiering, and obviously resiliency, all configured automatically. Now, this solution also allows for a high degree of fault tolerance. If a drive goes out or is even in an entire node, the data is still available and the service never goes down. Now, once more, this tech can be used to easily scale out on-prem environments. You can simply add an additional hard drive to expand your storage pool while the system is still up and running. You can even do this with your whole cluster. You can add additional nodes to the cluster dynamically, and then the system will automatically start to share the load across all these nodes, including the brand new one. This is huge for long-term IT strategies. Basically what this is it allows you to scale out the server to meet demand over a long period of time. This can effectively remove or reduce the need to replace servers forever, as you can simply just expand on the existing hardware's capability when needed. Now, while we're on the subject of storage, the new Azure File Sync service is currently available and easily integrated into Windows Server 2019. Essentially, what it does is revolutionary. It transforms a file server, for example, let's just say if you have a local file server, into a hot cache, so that the data that the organization accesses every day will be available still locally on the local drives, while providing a virtually bottomless storage solution, as cold data is automatically tiered up to Azure. Finally, the last major improvement for 2019 is an emphasis on better and faster tools for application development and deployment. With this release, there are now simple tools available to create cloud-native applications and also modernize existing apps using things like containers and microservices. Now, you may have heard of containers around cloud technology, and that's for good reason. It is a convenient and popular method of hosting workloads independent of a virtual machine. In other words, it's a unit of software that's bundled or packaged up with the code and the dependencies of that application together so that it can actually be run in any computing environment without operating system requirements. And with 2019, you can now create Linux-based as well as Windows-based containers and have them both run on your Windows host. For you Linux gurus out there, you can now run Linux-based software in a Windows environment, and it now supports Kubernetes and Docker daemon as a service. Now, containers certainly aren't new to a Windows Server environment because they were introduced, that's right, with 2016. But there were several improvements to them. They are now much more accessible and applicable. See, the base image that's used for the containers has first of all been split into 3 different versions, which actually allow for greater application compatibility. You now have options available to you. In addition, they actually reduced the size of the image. So now, therefore, it increases the performance as well. There's less for it to maintain, as well as it made integrating Windows authentication into containers a lot easier and more reliable. But first, let's say you have decided to upgrade your customer. The next step is to plan for that migration. So I'd like to quickly go over some of the tools that are available to you to help with that planning. First is one that you're probably, if you're an avid Solutions Lab viewer, familiar with, and that is the Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit. We love this thing here. It is an agentless, automated, multi-product planning and assessment tool. And guess what? It's free. It provides a detailed readiness assessment report with extensive hardware and software information. As well, and this is probably my favorite part, it adds actionable recommendations. So you can use it to show you can show your software usage reports and determine if the existing hardware that you have is ready for an upgrade or if it has to be replaced. It's also the very best software out there for planning cloud migration sizing, as well as local virtual machine allocation. We will provide links below so you can check it out for yourself. Additionally, we haven't talked too much about it today, but a number of your migrations are going to be of older SQL servers as well. In fact, keep this in mind, SQL Server 2014 will reach its mainstream end of support this July 9th and should definitely be part of this conversation if deployed. So for those opportunities, consider the Microsoft Data Migration Assistant. This application will improve your next SQL migration significantly by detecting compatibility issues that can impact database functionality on your new server. So essentially, this provides recommendations for performance and reliability so your migration goes smoothly. For both the Data Migration Assistant and the Assessment and Planning Toolkit, contact us at solutionslab@dnh.com for more information. Now, you've done your due diligence, you've planned for your migration, and you have a couple of options for that migration. First is what's called an in-place upgrade. This would clearly be the most preferred method of upgrading since you retain all the same hardware, the configuration, and all the installed features. However, before you consider an in-place upgrade, there's a few things you'll need to ensure to make sure that your existing OS as well as existing applications will support that upgrade. So here we go. First of all, if your customer is currently running Windows Server 2012 R2 or above, an in-place upgrade is available. However, keep in mind, upgrades from a 32-bit to 64-bit edition is not supported, and Windows Server 2019 is only available as 64-bit. Also, upgrades from one language edition to another is not supported, as well as upgrades from any pre-released version of Server or whatever, to Server 2019 is not supported. Finally, you cannot upgrade Essentials to anything but Essentials. So, with that eloquent segue, I am excited to demo for you a new product called Windows Admin Center. So this is relatively new. It came out last year. It's free, it's browser-based management, and it is designed to manage not only your servers, but virtual machines, any clusters and hyperconverged clusters, as well as your Windows 10 machines. Now, some of you Windows insiders out there actually might be familiar with the highly anticipated code name Project Honolulu. Well, here it is, Windows Admin Center. Let's take a look. Here is the Windows Admin Center. So this is the kind of first screen that you'll see. It's more or less the home screen. It shows all of the connections or devices that you have the ability to monitor and manage. So we only have a handful for this demo that are connected here, but normally this list obviously would be much larger with every Windows PC as well as server as well as cluster. So in order to get those isolated lists, you can just simply hit this drop-down menu here and see all the servers or all the computers and so on. This computer here is the local computer. It's the one that I'm currently on. I didn't add any additional desktops because, well, I don't have any. But really what we're here to show you is some of the sort of monitoring and managing functionality. So as I mentioned before, not only can you add local machines, but you can also add Azure VMs and them all from this one screen. For all intents and purposes, the actual Windows Admin Center doesn't really even know the difference. It claims everything is a server if it's a server, a cluster if it's a cluster, and so on. So we're going to add an Azure VM here to our Windows Admin Center and take a look at what you can actually do with it. So in order to do that, you need to register an Azure account. So in order to do that, we're going to go hit Settings up here. And under Gateway, we're going to click Azure and click Register. Really, the reason I want to show you this is because it's so simple to do. This is kind of an idea of everything that Windows Admin Center has to offer. We're going to copy this device's code, and I'm going to click on this provided link right here in order to log into Windows Azure. Essentially, what we're going to be doing is creating an Azure web app that allows for Windows Azure PowerShell to take over some of the management commands that we're going to tell it to do. So there we go. I already signed into my Azure account, so the device login is here immediately. I'm going to paste in the code and verify this says Microsoft Azure PowerShell, which is exactly the application we are trying to sign into. And click Continue. Like I said, I'm already signed in under the correct account. So here we go, and bam. We can close this window, and as you can see, it has successfully logged us in to an Azure subscription, and it shows the available tenants that are under that particular login. I'm going to select the one that I would like to add, which is this first one here. I just looked it up before, and hit Register. And just like that, that quickly, this tenant is already registered. So now I may add servers and other devices directly from this tenant to my Windows Admin Center. Now, we baked one in here before this video just to make things a little easier and make sure there was less room for error. So that would be this IP address right here, 40.84.57.228. I'm going to go ahead and connect to it and show you some of the functionality that you have once you have connected to a server. All right, so here's our overview page. Everything is pretty self-explanatory. Let me just kind of point it out to you though. Of course, we have our computer name. This is a simple file server that I put together. You know, some statistics about the machine itself, how much memory there is, how much space is available, your CPU usage, memory usage, and network usage. So very useful stuff right out of the gate. It gives you the ability to restart and shut down and all your typical stuff that you'd find in Azure or in a regular server right in front of you. But if you note over here, look at all the extra functionality, all at your fingertips. You can set up a backup. You can manage your certificates that you have on this server, what devices are connected to it, and so on. For example, one of the pretty compelling motions here is you can remotely connect to the server simply by clicking here. You can edit registry entries. You can adjust what roles and features this particular server is currently utilizing. So if you want it to run DNS, for example. And all of this is available as simply just a click. Okay, and with that, that's Windows Admin Center. And that is today's webcast. I know there's going to be a lot of questions out there, and fortunately for you, we're going to try our best to answer them coming up right away. So stick around for our Q&A, and if you have any general questions, you can always email us at solutionslab@dnh.com. Until next time, have a great one.